Hello, Professor. This is our strategic analysis of Under Armour. My name is Cole Hagel.
My name is Juan Ochoa.
I'm Alex Alvarado.
So first we're going to talk about the history of Under Armour. Under Armour was created in 1966 and was originally named KP Sports. Kevin Plank is the founder of Under Armour. In 1996, Kevin Plank was a football player at the University of Maryland. Plank wanted a shirt that would stay dry during practice, thus creating the first Under Armour prototype shirt in the basement of his grandmother's house. Under Armour now manufactures and sells shoes, shorts, and sporting equipment. We're going to talk about Under Armour's resources, capabilities, and competencies. Capabilities: the ability to make a high quality brand of t-shirt. Under Armour's high performance products are lighter, drier, and more comfortable than competitors. Under Armour makes sportswear for all levels, from youth to professionals. Competencies: one of Under Armour's core competencies is that they keep the product quality high. And the resources is 90% of Under Armour's manufacturing is done in the US, and Under Armour has suppliers all over the world. Under Armour's competitive advantage that's created from this is the manufacturing and the creation of dry fit clothing has created a competitive advantage for Under Armour. Under Armour's business model. Under Armour specializes in sportswear, attire, shoes, specialized shoes like basketball shoes and football cleats and running shoes, and also sporting equipment. The target market for Under Armour consists of athletes, specifically within the age group of 18 to 25. Under Armour's expenses are the cost of materials, advertising expenses, sponsorship expenses, and also PPE expenses, property, plant, and equipment. Next, we're going to talk about Under Armour's SWOT analysis. The first one we have is their strengths. One of their strengths is innovation. The creation of dry clothing and compression shirts is considered innovation that Under Armour created. Sponsorships: in the recent years, Under Armour has had superstar athletes promote their clothing, like Stephen Curry, who's arguably one of the best basketball players in the NBA right now. Growth: Under Armour has grown in popularity in the past decade. According to ValueLine.com, profits have soared in excess of 20% annually. In the recent years, Under Armour has passed Adidas for the number 2 spot in terms of domestic sportswear sales. Weakness is price. Under Armour's price is a little higher compared to Nike and Adidas. And advertising: due to Under Armour being fairly new, they don't have as much money spent on advertising compared to Nike.
Okay, so continuing from Cole's version of the SWOT analysis, I will be doing the opportunities and the weaknesses that Under Armour faces in the current market. So some of their opportunities that they have are the growth in the physical apparel industry. We see a lot more emerging companies coming in, and unfortunately for them, Under Armour's just got them beat, and they are taking a part of all of this emerging new market that they're Increase in sports participation in emerging markets. Emerging markets such as Asia and parts of Africa, they're becoming a lot more involved within the sport industry, and the physical apparel is becoming popular in these countries. Another opportunity that they have is increased e-commerce, which in our progressive society today, a lot of things are online. Under Armour is taking advantage of that, and they're selling a lot more things on platforms like Amazon in order to broaden their range of market. Their weaknesses that they have are a fluctuation in raw materials costs. So as far as the fabric and the rubber and the soles that they use to manufacture their clothing, it's becoming a lot more expensive for these companies to stay competitive. And the last thing is their Chinese labor increasing. So the prices that they're going to have to pay for the labor in China are rising, and it's causing Under Armour's profit margin to shrink.
Hello, I'll be talking about the pestle framework. So for the political factor, something that Under Armour has to take into account is FDI policies, foreign direct investment policies, and this really affects them in emerging markets like India. So in India, they're not allowed to own a whole retail store, and this really affects them because it cuts into the profit margins. And we're also seeing tariffs. Tariffs are going to be imposed on China, and that could really hurt Under Armour and their profit margins. Another factor is the economic factor, and this can be both good and bad. So, for example, the performance apparel market is growing, and more people are starting to buy all this sportswear. So that's good for the company. Something bad about the economic factor is Chinese labor cost, as we saw during the threats. That is something that could potentially hurt Under Armour, and also increase in raw materials. Alec went through that, and it's something that can really affect Under Armour. A social factor can be women are starting to become more physically active. Past generations, it was only the men who bought workout clothing and performance clothing. Now women are starting to have a demand for this. That's really good for Under Armour and the whole sportswear industry in general. Another thing that baby boomers are starting to become physically fit, and they're demanding clothes, and they're really helping Under Armour sell to people that normally didn't buy performance clothing. And as Alec mentioned, emerging sports markets. So we see that all across Africa and Asia, that people who previously couldn't afford retail clothing are now having the means to do so. So that's just another market that Under Armour could tap into. A technological factor can be their transition and increase in sales using e-commerce. So this can be an opportunity if used correctly. We've seen Nike and Adidas really embrace this by having apps, by having contests through e-commerce. So if Under Armour is able to gain a competitive advantage there by having some sort of better product, they can really outsell both Nike and Adidas. Our last two factors are ecological and legal. For ecological factor, we are seeing this sustainability trend. This also goes into an eco-friendly trend. An example I have for this is Patagonia. Patagonia has really embraced being sustainable. They ran an ad campaign where they didn't want people to buy their vest. Instead, they wanted people to take their vest in for repairs. And that really creates a bond with the customer, because it shows that a company is not just profit driven. It cares about the environment, and it really brings in a whole new market of people. Finally, a legal factor is their misrepresentation of revenues and profits. We saw this before a couple of years around 2013 and 2014, where they lied about their revenue and profits, and this could be a principal agent problem. It was right out of the recession, so the fact that they were making all this money right out of the recession really raised some eyebrows. So it's something that they should really look into. All right, let's talk a little bit about Porter's 5 forces. So as a threat of substitute, we determine it's moderate to high, and this really comes down to who you're targeting. So threat of substitutes is moderate to someone who's an athlete, because they have already this brand identity and brand loyalty, but it is high to someone who is not an athlete, because someone who is not an athlete typically just goes for what's on trend or what's on sale. For threat of new entrants, we think it's high because now we see all these emerging sportswear companies like Lululemon. We've seen Patagonia grow within the last year. We've seen the North Face starting to become more popular. So all these new entrants are cutting into Under Armour's market share. For bargaining power of suppliers, we think it's moderate, mainly because Under Armour is so established, but raw materials are always fluctuating. That's why we determine it's moderate. Bargaining power of buyers, again, we think this is something that can be moderate or high depending on if the person is an athlete or it's not. If a person is an athlete, they don't really have much bargaining power because there's already this brand loyalty. But if someone isn't an athlete, the bargaining power of the buyer is really high because they can just go to someone else. And rivalry, we would think it's really high because there's Adidas, there's Nike, there's all these different companies who are fighting for the same customer.
In this slide, we're going to be talking about Under Armour's business and corporate strategies. Now, these strategies are used to combat the threat of entry and also to deal with their rivals. Now, under the threat of entry, what they have to their advantage is the first mover advantage over certain products like the dry fit clothing. They now currently hold 70% of the US market, which would be considered a business strategy. New entries are coming in with similar innovative technologies as Under Armour. So to combat that, they have patented signature sweat-proof clothing, which has really helped them dominate. Along with that, they've also created brand loyalty by supporting athletes and engaging with their customers both online and in person. So it's helping a lot with their brand development as well as fighting off the threat of new entries. Now, when they deal with their rivalries, a lot of the things that they do is internal. So by eliminating 50% of their public stock in order to ensure that they have more control over their products, this is due to the fact that they want control over their products and they want to make sure that every product does something unique. Another way that they deal with their rivalry is that they've spread out their stores to over 200 locations across the globe. And by creating a larger economy of scale, this has made them a cost leader. Another way to deal with rivalry is that they've been implementing a 5-year plan. So in the year 2023, they hope to make drastic changes in their supply chain and their financial operational agility. Lastly, they utilize the use of their celebrity endorsements. As Juan mentioned, Steph Curry and other NBA and professional stars that have Under Armour as a sponsor. Next, and lastly, I want to talk about Under Armour's competitive advantage that they own. Under Armour has been able to sustain competitive advantage by focusing on their business strategy of cost leadership. Competing with companies like Nike and Adidas, they have managed to create a lot of value in the eyes of their customers while creating a system that has allowed them to keep their costs low and their value high. This is how Under Armour has been able to dominate their respective field and stay afloat. So this concludes our presentation on Under Armour. I want to say thank you, Professor Zhang.
We all really enjoyed this course and we did learn a lot.
Yeah, we appreciate it. You have a good summer.
Have a great summer.